Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the PetaPixel podcast. My name is Jaron Schneider, and I'm joined, as always, by Jordan Drake, YouTube director for PetaPixel, and Chris Niccolls, who's our host. Look at that joyful smile he's got. Before we get into this week's episode, which I want to mention, we are recording early, so if something has happened this week that we're not addressing, it's because we're recording this on a Friday as opposed to a Tuesday.
Time travel.
These two are going to take some time off, which they deserve, so we're going to try and get this done early.
But think of it as like the worst time capsule ever made, right? Like you're only seeing the past from like 3 days ago. So.
Well, it's like burying a time capsule for 3 days and then digging it up. Well, that was
yeah.
just a lot of burying and digging. Yeah. What was the point of that?
That's what you've all done. Congratulations.
What I wanted to say was, before we get into this week's episode, we are going to be at Adobe to ask them questions about their business, their software, their strategy. But the thing is, we don't want to come up with those questions. We don't think that that's necessarily the best approach. We want you guys to ask them whatever you want.
Yes.
So send us your questions, whether that be in the comments below, in an email, or through SpeakPipe. All of those links are in the description below, or if you're on the listening to us audio only, they are in the description of this episode. Send us those questions, and we are going to ask Adobe those questions next week.
Yes.
At Adobe. So that whole episode. Yes.
Your chance to get heard by Adobe. Yes.
So send us the questions. That's the biggest thing I wanted to get out there. But beyond that, this week we have a lot actually happened. We have got some news to talk about. Tamron announced a new all-in-one. Sigma announced that they're going to make their very first Cine lens with autofocus. Canon has patented 5 zoom lens designs. I want to get the thoughts
unimaginable lenses.
Yeah, that's right, because they said we couldn't imagine them. And then
nobody could possibly imagine. Yeah.
And then Atomos announced a HDMI display that actually lets you control the camera through it, which is basically like, finally, that sounds great. All that and more, especially since we've got kind of 3 stories we want to talk about this week as our main story. How shooting film for YouTube is extremely difficult. I want to give you guys an update on the repair of my dad's Nikon film cameras. And then I've got a question for everyone, and I want to hear some pros and cons, and I want to hear from all y'all on what you think we should do regarding HDR on YouTube. So we're going to get into all that.
Listening. Keep listening.
Let's get into it.
And we're back. And as always, we are back because of our main sponsor for the PetaPixel podcast, OM Systems. We very much appreciate their support here. And we have a treat for the listeners because OM System has just shared us their August specials. You won't want to miss them. I mean, OM System is on a huge deals and value kind of push right now, and it's really fantastic for you guys. So until September 1st, you get some incredible deals. $300 off the OM1 Mark II body, which I personally use and love. It's usually priced at $23.99.99, but right now, $20.99.99. Fantastic opportunity. Don't miss it if you haven't already picked one up. This is the time to do it. You can also save $300 on the OM5. That also comes with a 12 to 45 kit lens. So you got a really compact package, but that's the 12 to 45 f4 Pro lens. So you're getting a step up in optical performance. Yeah. Normally $15.99. It's now available for $12.99. So that's a really great deal. Perfect combo for someone looking for something smaller, lighter. I love that camera for like street photography, walking around, travel. It's great for that as well. For those of you that want to go all out, we've got a great bundle here. You can get the OM1 Mark II, very popular for wildlife photography, and you can get that bundle with the 150 to 600 f5 to 6.3 IS lens and an MC20 2x teleconverter, and you're going to save like $830. So that kit is normally that kit is normally very expensive in the $5,000 range. You can get it for $46.99.97. That takes care of like all your stuff. You've got a lens that can cover any sort of wildlife or sports kind of stuff. You got a great body behind it. Unbeatable deal for serious photographers looking to expand. Or if you're looking for like a second system, OM System is a great option for people who want to do more rugged outdoor kind of stuff. OM System is also giving you discounts on the entire range of Zuiko macro lenses. So you can also do that. 30 mil, the 60 mil, and the 90 mil. Save up to $300 on those. Get closer to capturing details of the tiny world around you. So don't wait. Remember, these are deals for August and they end September 1st. So you got to get on it. Take advantage of these incredible savings while they last. Visit, as usual, explore.omsystem.com/petapixel or visit your local authorized OM System retailer today.
Thanks,
Great read,
OM.
Chris. Fantastic.
Thanks, man.
Top tier. Couldn't have done it better myself.
There you go.
Let's
As long as I can beat Jaron, that's all I want.
Yeah,
I just want to do as good as
bar,
Jaron
right?
Schneider.
Yeah, right. All right. I don't know if you guys know this, and by that I mean I'm not saying that seriously, but Tamron announced a new 28 to 300 millimeter f4 to 7.1 this past
And our
week.
video's live.
We reviewed it.
So I wanted to ask you guys if you had anything you wanted to mention about this that you didn't say in your review, because in my opinion, this lens is kind of... tell me if I'm off base. This lens, to me, feels like the kind that we were getting from Tamron years and years and years ago, when they were basically focused on providing really affordable all-in-ones for like an entry-level DSLR shooter.
Very consumer forward.
Right. So if I bought a Rebel, I would go and grab a Tamron, 28 to 300 to toss on there, and I feel pretty happy for a couple years before I realized I wanted a little bit more aperture control. So I'm just curious, like in 2024, knowing who's buying cameras now and the types of cameras that manufacturers are saying that they're trying to aim towards, like more enthusiast level, more high performance, because like smartphones are completely eating the bottom market. Is this who's buying this lens and who's it for? Is it a good fit now?
I feel like it still is exactly the same fit and intention that it was for the last 50 years. It's like, it is that convenient travel lens, that compact lens that can do everything, and that does have some optical compromises that you have to deal with. But, like Tamron is kind of famous for this. Sigma is really pulled off of this game. Tamron is still doing this. But, even the major Nikon companies, Sony, I mean, they've all been making these super zooms as well here and there. Panasonic came out with one that we reviewed as well recently. Like, it's interesting to see that market build back. I don't know if that's just like, push back on what a bigger camera can do compared to a smartphone. I don't know if that's just, maybe people, they're like, hey, we haven't revisited this market in a long time. We should probably get back in here. Tamron did make a 28 to 200, which we reviewed back in the DPR days. And that was actually one of our favorite lenses. I mean, it was really well done. And I think Tamron have done a good job with this lens as well, but you absolutely have compromises.
Yeah, I think it's kind of every mount needs to have this, because I really call them vacation zooms. I don't think we're seeing as many people grabbing a DSLR in an 18 to 200 as we used to see. But there are definitely times where you want big reach in a small package. The odd thing to me is releasing this with a new optical formula going up to 300 mils, but quite slow. I would have loved to see that 28 to 200, which was a 2.8 to 5.6. That was kind of its standout feature. I would have loved to have seen an update on that, because it didn't have their new fast motor. It didn't have stabilization. They could absolutely just add a stabilizer, fast motor on that. It would be a great upgrade. And then you're really differentiating between look, on these mirrorless lenses, it's still small, but we're getting a brighter aperture. And that's really compelling to me, where this really does feel like, something that would have been achievable on a DSLR, although it is a little bit smaller. I think it's an odd choice.
I think a big part of that, though, is this is for E-mount. Tamron's primarily making for E-mount. And Sony do have a 24 to 240. So maybe they wanted to be able to beat them some way, right? Like they can match them for wide angle, or here they can beat them for telephoto range, and at least, provide that niche so that nobody else is touching right now. But it's a nice lens. I mean, I shot it in a very unconventional situation at Calgary Folk Fest. I mean, guys, check out the review.
Those are good
slow
pictures.
Aperture. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. But that slow aperture was punishing in low light situations, so we really did push it. But it's a sharp lens. It just doesn't have any other chutzpah.
I saw your corners on your chart, and I think I went, ugh, when I saw it when he first tossed them up. Like, oh god, those are soft.
They're not. They're not great at the wide angle. I mean, that's the thing with these lenses, right? You got to give somewhere to get somewhere else.
For what is it, $900? It's just not possible to make it great everywhere.
It's a really good price. And it is actually very sharp. Otherwise, in the centers, like where you're mostly going to use it, I think you'll be happy.
Yeah, just don't use it for landscape, right?
What camera would you buy this for? Like if I
like an A7 IV?
Yeah, it's like
A7 IV.
That's a good point.
Yeah, kind of like a mid-resolution kind of thing. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You use it on a 6700, and then you just crop out all the corners. You don't worry about it.
There you go.
And you get even more telephoto range.
There you go.
Yeah, 450 mils and sharp in the center. I do want to say, like, Tamron kind of has this range already covered. So it just seems an odd, like we recently did our ranking of all the manufacturers and we said like Tamron's been really quiet lately. So I do find it kind of surprising that they did this. I mean, I want Tamron primes to come back.
Yeah.
So I'm saying it here.
I'm glad you said it again, because we were talking in the car when we were the last time we were in California, and I was like, you guys remember those primes? Those were really good. They were right at the tail end of the DSLR era. And then they just never revisited them, which is sad because they were good.
We were saying just the other day, like, man, I wish there was an 85 mil with good macro that was just like a great hybrid. And they made beautiful 85 1/8 that did 1:2 macro back in the day. And I think that would be really compelling on mirrorless as well. So it's time, Tamron.
Let's see.
It's time, Ron.
Caught me off guard with that one. I wasn't ready for it. That's why I laughed.
Dad joking up a storm over here.
Yeah. Well, Jordan, you're probably excited about this one, actually, because it's just interesting. Sigma announced that they are going to make a cinema virgin. Cinema
virgin.
Plenty of those out there.
Cine version of the 28 to 45 f1.8 art, and it will be the first one to feature autofocus. So Sigma has converted their standard photo lenses into Cine lenses by removing the autofocus motor and changing the housing, but the optical formula has been basically the same. It looks like they're doing that again, but they aren't removing the autofocus motor. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on this, Jordan, because like I don't quite get who that would be for.
So it is kind of interesting. Now, this isn't the first time we've seen this. Sony did a series of like manual, like it was actually a focus by wire lens, but they rehoused them. So it had autofocus and still had like a focus ring with markings on it. And yeah, I mean, it does make sense for some situations. You might want to do like sports, wildlife, those things where the Sony autofocus is really, really good for that. I mean, it's certainly better than I could pull focus. And this is, remember, a very wide aperture lens, a 1.8. So that autofocus motor can really help you out with that. So it makes sense in that regard. What's interesting looking at it is when I saw this, I was like, okay, so the lens already has a stepless toggleable aperture ring on it. So that's one thing that definitely differentiates these. They'll add some gears to it, I'm sure. So you'll be able to put it in a follow focus. But my big question is, all of those Cine series Sigmas have been based on DSLR designs because they had a mechanical focus ring built into that optical formula. They have not been doing that with their mirrorless lenses. Those are all focus by wire designs. So are they actually going to completely redesign that? So this is a mechanically coupled focus ring on it, or is it going to be kind of what Sony's doing, where it's focused by wire, you spin it to the distance scale, and then the motor just says like, okay, we'll use the autofocus motor and put it in that place. The issue with that, and I mean, those Sony lenses are pretty old, but they always had this kind of hesitation. Like you didn't feel actually connected to the lens when you were doing it. It was like a half, not even a half, but like a quarter second, eighth of a second behind is still enough to throw you off when you're trying to snap focus. So if they can sort that out, then they could have a really interesting series of like cinema lenses with like those Sigma linear motors are wicked fast. That would just open up a whole new audience for them, I think. Especially I'm thinking about it like right now with the Olympics. If they brought out, a set of autofocus cinema lenses, that would be very compelling for people with big budgets.
I'm skeptical. I think they're going to stick to the focus by wire formula personally. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, they'd have to put a helicoid in and maybe incorporate a clutch or something. Would be nice if we wanted to have actual, mechanical, linkage. But at the same time, you know, and you alluded to this, Jordan, is like the autofocus for video on actually multiple platforms now is getting far more usable than it used to be. Mm-hmm. And you even yourself, I mean, we often now use a lot of autofocus in our own content, right?
Yep.
And we have autofocus lenses doing that. So yeah, I don't know. It is exciting. It's interesting. We'll see what they do.
I think that it's the cinema thing that throws people. Like, do I think on movie sets they're going to be using autofocus? Absolutely not. But I do think for documentary work, you know, reality TV is still a big thing for that. This would make a lot of sense. And it does really reinforce what we said when we did this review. We're like, for photographers, this seems like a weird option. But for video people, this is very compelling. And then this just kind of reinforces that opinion, I think.
Yeah.
We probably won't see what this looks like and get more. And I don't even know if they're going to provide all that information you're asking for, Jordan, until at least September 13th, because this was announced to be part of Sigma's booth at the IBC conference, the International Broadcasting Convention.
We're going to IBC, right? We're flying out there?
I wish.
Oh.
It's in Amsterdam. I would like to go to that.
Sounds great. Sounds super fun.
Wonderful. But no, we have no plans to go to IBC. But I'm going to follow up with Sigma as we get closer to that, just to get some images of it, because it would be neat to talk about this again in another month.
We don't tend to do reviews on cinema lenses because it is pretty niche, but I think this would definitely be something to look at.
If they make certain changes that you're hoping to see in it, I think it would be worth a revisit, and you could look at them side by side. And I'd be curious how much they charge for it.
Yeah. It could also just be a rehousing, right? It could just be a rehousing.
Absolutely.
I think that's like the baseline expectation. At the very little least, it'll be that.
Put some gears on it that I could also do with zip ties, and if it's still a focus by wire lens, I don't know if it's going to be worth the premium.
Canon, which previously said that it would be creating lenses that nobody could even imagine. That's how advanced they would be.
I didn't imagine these particular ones in their defense. So
they did file some new patents in Japan for 5 new lens designs. I'm going to read them aloud to you guys, and you let me know what you think. 2 of these seem redundant, but we're gonna go with. I think they're gonna go with an either or on these. So they patented 2 designs, and we'll see what they actually give. Right. But we have a 15 to 28 f2.8, a 17 to 30 f2.8. Like I said, kind of redundant. 300 to 600 2.8 to 4.5, and a 400 to 600 2.8 to 4.
And I think you missed a 70 to 300
and
F4.
A 70 to 300 f4. There we go. That's actually 5.
I mean, like, clearly the first 2 wide angles, we have imagined those before. That's not out of the realm of imagination.
No, you haven't.
It's very, it's
like
they're very
go to 28, classic. But could it go to 30 millimeters?
Here's what I haven't imagined. I haven't imagined both of these lenses existing at the same time from the same manufacturer.
Yeah. I mean, we see this all the time, though, lens patents that don't actually come to fruition.
Sure,
they might just be like, we're trying to figure out, the price, manufacturing cost, but we have these optical formulas. Let's just slap a patent on them right now. The one thing I'm curious about is, are these going to be full frame or APS-C? It looks like a full frame design from the charts.
I'm fairly certain that Canon stopped really putting a lot of effort into their APS-C designs.
Yeah, they don't care about APS-C.
Yeah, they're like, Sigma and Tamron can have that. And
7300 is a classic telephoto range. And that actually is quite interesting.
F4,
a 7300 F4.
Yeah.
Did you imagine
That's cool. Yeah, no, it's so beyond. Like, I can only imagine 7300s having, floating apertures. I can't imagine.
That's the only way.
My mind is blown. But the 7300 focal length is very useful. I mean, this is like your classic lens that you get as your second purchase from your kit lens. And so it's nice to offer a more premium option for that. Obviously, it's going to be physically quite large, and I don't think it's going to be cheap. But to give people that usable range that's a little bit more advanced is nice. But I mean, we've seen like 100 to 300 f4s and stuff exist in the world before. What is really nice is Canon, we've been saying they need good telephotos that aren't just rehashed SLR designs with new mounts. We need to see high-end telephoto lenses. That's something where Nikon's been kicking their butt. And so that's great. I mean, that I would say is a big priority.
Sony's been doing good there too. So Sony and Nikon have really great mirrorless designs, and Canon hasn't done that at all. Have they?
They've got a few out there, but they are generally slower. I do think like there's 70 to 200, both the f4 and the 2.8 have that nice collapsible design. If they could do a really small 70 to 3 f4.
Yeah, that's what I was
That'd
thinking.
be very cool.
Yeah.
Like, even if they took the collapsible design of the 70 to 200 and it was just a little bit bigger than that, and by a little I mean like notably bigger because of the extra 100, but it would still be reasonably sized. I
cool.
feel like I would probably pick a 70 to 300 f4 over a 70 to 200 2.8.
Yeah,
That could be sexy.
Yeah.
And it'll give a more affordable alternative to like the 100 to 300 2.8, which is going to be out of the price range of a lot of people. So, while still getting like good light gathering, decent range, maybe you could throw a converter on that as well. That would be ideal.
Yeah, that's the one big thing is the 70 to 2s don't accept teleconverters. That's how they got away with that collapsible design. So one of the classic things was get a 70 to 2 2.8 and a 1.4 teleconverter to get you up to like a 300 f4, pretty close to that. This would make that a possibility again. So that, again, would kind of offset the limitation of those 70 to 2s.
Anything else in here of interest to you guys?
The other two are going to be expensive as hell. So they sound great.
Like 400 to 600 to 8 to 4. That's going to be expensive.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, for people like shooting at the Olympics right now, like rock on. That sounds great. But I mean, think of what a 600 f4 costs. And then just going like a third of a stop slower on this, adding a zoom mechanism, it's going to be huge and extremely expensive. Sure. And this is the chief complaint that we're hearing so much is people are like, I want third-party options for Canon because they're really focusing on super high-end optics right now. And this continues that. Certainly with these two telephotos. These are things that'll be like in rental houses and news agencies, but they're not going to be for a lot of enthusiast photographers.
I'm worried that when Canon said like 5 optical formulas that no human can imagine, maybe they meant like that no middle class human can imagine.
Yeah, like a Saudi prince could possibly imagine because they're the only people who will be able to afford it. Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. But hey, you know what? I mean, more lenses from Canon, always great. And I mean, I'm not saying we don't need these focal lengths. Obviously, we're poking in the bear at are they really that unimaginable? But they're absolutely important to have in their lineup. They do need these.
Of note, these are probably very far away as far as like seeing them made. I think what we'll end up seeing first are a series of primes, probably a 50 and an 85 and a 105. Those are my guess. Probably
give me a 28. Give me a 28.
Maybe
someone's got to make a 28.
Yeah, I bet that comes last.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
you get a 15 to 28 f2.8.
Okay, that's right.
But those because Canon redid their prime lens design for the 35, the one with the aperture ring.
Yeah,
and they said there's more coming. My expectation is that they're going to redo 50, 85, and 105.
Start with the most useful focal length and then work your way out. Makes perfect sense.
Don't love 50, so I kind of hope 85 comes first, but a lot of people like 50.
These are great. 50s are great.
You love 50. I find 50 to be
only
good for portraits, is my opinion. Nope, you disagree. Just like I think 35 is good for everything, and you hate it for everything. Yep. All right, last story. Atomos announced the Shinobi II. It's an HDMI display that includes USB-C, so you can control your camera fully from it, which means if you put this on a gimbal, that is much easier to manage than the current. This is great. Right, Jordan?
How many times, I'm sure you've used external recorders, Jaron. How many times have you poked at the external recorder to initiate autofocus tracking? And then you're like, oh, damn it. No.
There's no
like a little flippy flip screen. And some cameras disable the LCD on the camera when you hook an HDMI monitor into it. It's a huge pain. So, yes, this is a very useful thing. Now, this isn't the first time we've seen it. I know there have been like a few of the Chinese companies making... I'm trying to remember the name of them, but they have advertised something like this before, but the functionality has been very limited, where Atomos is a big company that has direct communication with the camera companies. So I'm expecting that this will be pretty seamless interface here.
It gets bright, too.
Yeah, 1,500 nits. 100?
Use that outside with ease.
It's a really nice upgrade. I have the original Shinobi. I don't use it a ton, and it was quite nice because it was just a very small light option compared to the Ninjas because they had to have like the caddies for SSDs and all the LANC controls and stuff like that. So if you're looking for a nice light monitor, this looks like a really good option and more like a little more upmarket, more like a small HD or something.
It's not that expensive. It's $350, which it's not a 4K display, but that's fine. Don't need it.
Yeah, at that size.
You can put an SD card in there, which is nice. Although the image they use shows only UHS-1, which doesn't give me a lot of confidence.
I believe that's for uploading all of like your LUTs and things like
Okay.
that. For it, I don't
right.
think you can actually record with
That
it.
makes sense. That makes sense.
Is this
you use it
working
with
with all
Panasonic cameras?
brands?
That's cool. What?
Yeah,
Sorry?
Panasonic? Which brands is it working with?
Canon, Panasonic, and Sony, as well as the Zcam's E2 line.
Ooh, okay.
They did not publish a full list of compatible cameras, but they say most in quotes. So I'm assuming it's like all the most recent cameras that it will work with.
Yeah, I'd love to see Fuji added to that since they just added tap to track to their latest video models.
Obviously, now that they have the protocols, they can make larger, higher quality displays as well. I'm sure that'll be coming very shortly.
Yeah.
So neat.
Cool.
All right. We've got 3 main stories this week because each of them I think will take just a little bit of time to go through. So before we get to that, though, we've got a main story sponsor this week, and it's Skillshare. Thanks to our main story sponsor, Skillshare. As a photographer, I don't rely on just my camera. There's so much more to it than that. To learn the creative skills I need to succeed and grow, I use the world's largest online learning community, Skillshare, which has thousands of video classes on illustration, graphic design, photography, music, marketing, productivity, and more. They really do have a class for everyone. And if you aren't sure where to start, Skillshare makes it easy with their learning paths, which are hand-picked classes meant to be taken in order, building on each other, and reinforcing lessons. They are available in a range of experience levels from beginner to advanced and cover a huge variety of categories so you can expand your skills. One thing I have learned in my creative career is that no matter how long I have been doing it, I can always find ways to improve and do things differently. I'm a big fan of Marques Brownlee, so when I saw his class called YouTube Success Script, Shoot, and Edit, I knew I had to take it to gain new insights into how to improve the way I make YouTube videos. And yes, I do make YouTube videos, like this one you're watching right now. With slower work schedules, many of us find ourselves with more time to explore our passions and hobbies during the summer. I plan to make the most of my summer by learning how to be more efficient and creative with my YouTube video creation. The first 500 people to use the link in the description below will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. Thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring today's main stories, the first of which is shooting for YouTube on film is hard.
Yeah, so we scheduled this with the expectation that you would be looking at a piping hot YouTube video, largely
fresh out of the oven,
with a ton of actual Super 8 footage in it. We went and shot that, got to be a month ago, I believe, at this point, Chris.
It's getting long.
And it turns out development can be a real hassle, especially in Canada, where there's one place that does it, and they decided to move locations coinciding with us producing these episodes. So this is a preview. Look forward to it. At some point, that film is going to arrive, and we're going to have a camera review with a large chunk of it shot on film, and we're going to be reviewing the Kodak Super 8 camera. That's the name of the camera. I'm like, isn't it like some numbers and letters and something like that? They're like, no, it's the Kodak Super 8 camera. So that's what I use to shoot it. So we've got a review for that camera coming up, and then, yes, that other episode there. But here's Chris, what did you think when I said, like, okay, we're going to test this camera and we're going to shoot some film? What was your initial impression?
What my initial impression was, this is going to be a BS hassle, and you're going to be grumpy, and it's going to be taxing.
Yep.
But no, I mean... No, look, okay. So from my experience, I mean, we had a friend of ours, our good friend Alex Mitchell. You know, he's a very big cinema guy, sound guy, director, camera guy. He shoots a lot on set, and so he also wanted to play with this because it is an interesting product, and he kind of gave his opinions, put it through its paces, kind of looked at the workings. Then him and Jordan shot a lot of Super 8 film for one of our reviews, which I think you guys will really enjoy. And so, like. If it ever comes out. And so, from my perspective, it wasn't that different. Like it's cool. Obviously you've got to do like sound sync, okay, sound rolling, and then action and go, right? And of course I can hear the motor going, I can hear the film running. Yeah, it's neat, and Alex and Jordan both were very happy and excited on set using it, right? Like this is their joy, right? I mean, this is their nerdy joy in this regard. So they had a good time. I had a good time, but I'm still skeptical during it. Like, it's not practical, right? It's fun, but is it practical? And as we're now finding out, there's a lot of impractical
be a sticky
issues
wicket
that come
there.
with this. Sounds like the shooting part was actually the most simple process. That wasn't a problem. It's really the after effects, the post, the scanning, the cost.
Well, how much did it cost?
$5,000 US for this guy. So
no, not the camera, the film and the
develop and scan.
development.
Develop and scan. I still don't have a final total, but their estimate was $555 for that.
And how many minutes did you shoot?
Okay, so we shot 6 rolls of film. You get 2.5 minutes per roll. So yeah,
Jesus.
20 minutes,
so like
roughly.
15 minutes. Yeah. So we had a big debate. I was like, I think if we rehearse and like lock it down, can we shoot all of our A-roll on this camera? And do an entire episode top to bottom on Super 8. And we decided against it because I did want, some more B-roll, some more creative shots on it, focus on that, and to be able to do some camera tests with the film that we had as well. So unfortunately, the whole episode is not top to bottom shot on film, but all.
And I think that was the
B-roll,
right decision.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was going to be tight for sure. And you would have had to like hit it first try every time.
I can hit it. That's not a problem. No, but yeah, I was thinking logistically, I'm like, if we screw up too many times, like you're not going to get any samples.
Out of film. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we should say why the Kodak is so interesting, because you mentioned, Chris, like, sound sync and stuff like that. So what this camera actually does compared to a traditional Super 8 camera, first of all, it's got a video tap built into it. So you flip it out, it's a digital display, just like you would with a camera. And what it's actually doing is it's a separate camera behind like a little frosted glass cover that's looking out through the lens that you mount to the camera. So that is quite interesting, as opposed to using an optical viewfinder on it. The downside to that is it's a terrible video feed coming out of that thing. So focusing, I mean, like 8mm is like a smartphone sensor size, basically. So most of these shots were able to do hyperfocal, but I decided, because I'm a masochist, both of those are the same thing, I think. Shoot all of the camera product shots with this camera. So that's a lot of close-ups, and trying to like nail the focus on that tiny little thing was definitely an interesting struggle. And we're going to talk about these more in the camera review.
Sure.
But the other cool thing, it has a built-in spot meter on it. And I was expecting we'd be out there like everything else, clicking around the light meter. Alex brought a light meter with him. But we're trusting the camera meter. So I'm going to have to see how the exposure.
Yeah, we still don't know the answer to that. Is it
This is
good?
all the stuff I wanted to talk about on the pod. But the film's still not
we
here.
just don't know.
In the camera, like you don't
today? The film this week was supposed to come this week, right?
Yeah, I asked for an update, and it's still not ready yet. They're having issues since they've moved the machines. So,
oh my goodness,
we'll get there. It's going to happen. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is Chris mentioned sync, and this will actually let you record sync audio straight into an SD card on it, and actually labels, like when you drop in a new roll of film, you're like, oh, this is my roll of 200 tungsten film, second roll, and it puts that on the memory card. And then it's all sunk up once you drop the video footage in. So I could see this being so useful for students, is what I kept going back to. Like if you want to play with film for the very first time, could be really useful for that. And I am looking forward to getting my nags and pulling out a box cutter and some tape. And I might actually try and stick together a little Super 8 thing I can put in a projector here and play it back. Like we shot some family stuff at the Stampede. I'm doing it, damn it, Chris. This is all right. Fun. This is pleasure for me. But the big thing that I wanted to talk about in this pod is this something we're going to do again. What do you think, Chris?
I don't know. Like it just doesn't seem that practical. I mean, for a specific filmic look, an analog feel and flavor to your creative artistic videos, I could absolutely see that. Sure. Mm-hmm. People do that. Why not? It's great. It's cool. Concert video, fun documentary stuff. Absolutely. 100%. But for what we do, God, no, like it's impractical. It's expensive. There's a lot of room for error. There's a lot of room for, the one developing company moving sites while you're doing it. Like I don't see how you could use this in a structured workflow where you're trying to, stick to deadlines and schedules. Short film is one thing. A YouTube video, like, no, I don't know. And maybe I'm being silly. And we'll talk.
I don't think you're being silly. Go ahead.
Yeah, and in the reviews too, like, Jordan's going to go over it, but I mean, my opinion when we're using is like, this is a cool product. It looks neat, but it feels unfinished, and it feels like there's a lot of things that could have been done that weren't done or left out, or for the sake of time or money, who knows. And this is a first attempt, but I don't even know if this camera would survive a lot of heavy use. Like, it feels to me more like an analog novel toy kind of realm. We talk about cameras, analog cameras where, okay, this analog camera is more serious. This analog camera is more like a fun toy. And I feel like this is more in fun toy realm, kind of trying to skirt, using it for some more professional creative work. I don't know. It's not my expertise.
Wildly expensive for a toy.
Yeah.
Because what'd you say? It was $5,000 for the camera. Does that include, that includes one lens, right? Or is there two lenses in that box?
Yeah, it comes with a really nice little 6mm Ricoh lens on there.
Great.
An f1.2.
So you can start shooting immediately. I believe it also ships with 1 or 2 rolls of film, which is the equivalent of 2.5 or 5 total minutes of shooting. And
one
roll of film, you had 6 rolls, you said?
6 rolls, yeah.
So that's... mathing, it's not my strong suit.
15 minutes.
I was going to say under 20 minutes of shooting. That costs $500 to develop. That doesn't include...
And scan, yep.
And scan. That doesn't include the cost of the film itself. It just seems like even if a school was going to do this to teach you how to shoot motion picture film, that's a big expense for a school to take on.
That's what I mean. I mean, Jordan thinks they're good for students, and I was saying in the car, I'm like, I don't think these are good for students. Like,
the students aren't going to nail the shot every time. They're going to burn through 2.5 minutes. The OVF
does not, or the EVF does not give you exposure simulation, so you can't kind of eyeball based on that.
Trust that spot meter,
Yeah, just the spot meter. Like, you have to know what you're doing to operate this camera. And I mean, yes, students have to learn to know what they're doing, but anybody who's buying this, wanting to get into it, you're very likely going to mess up a lot of stuff at the beginning, and that's going to be prohibitively expensive. You think 35 mil film is bad, in an analog photo camera, right? I mean, this is why the Pentax 17 was made half frame and stuff, is to kind of get people into something which is admittedly expensive and admittedly difficult, and kind of be like, okay, let's ease that transition a little bit. So I don't know.
Okay, so now
it was fun in the 70s.
I'm going to throw out there that shooting the episode, I had a good time with that. Then I took the camera because I'm like, we need some more examples of speed ramping. I want to shoot in more different lighting conditions. I took it to the Calgary Stampede with my kids, which is like a big outdoor show. And I had a blast. It was so much fun. Just using that, like, really, okay, I got 3 seconds of shooting on this. And it does cool stuff like I can actually speed ramp from like very low frame rate for fast motion to slow motion in the same shot. Now, of course, my exposure will change in that, but it's going to look really cool. And then while we were at Folk Fest, I ran into some people shooting 16. And oh man, I got like, is that the next step? So I got the bug a little bit. I would never use it for a YouTube video. I would love to just go shoot like a music video on film or something like that as a creative project. I got the bug, the sound, the feeling of the motor whirring around in your camera, the shaklaki when you stop rolling. Oh, it's magical, Jaron. So I'm going to say, is it practical? Not at all, but I had a great time and I'm really going to miss.
I feel like that's the only point of these cameras is fun.
I can't give a practical reason for it. I mean, the aesthetic will be Super 8. It's going to be technically bad, but it's going to be distinctive.
Well, yeah. And again, I would see now we're kind of getting into the weeds on it and stuff. It's like, but I was asking Alex about this, and it's like there are far more practical used high-end Super 8mm cameras that you can buy, which will be much cheaper, probably more capable. You know what I mean? And will be doing the same kind of stuff. Lots of good lenses, all that kind of stuff. Some have really nice built-in zoom lenses and stuff. So it's kind of like, it's an interesting product. And again, I think we could probably leave it there because you're going to do
how many they sold, like, because these things are not easy to get. You had to get on a waiting list to get one.
Saying it's a wait list, and they're still going to be filling it for a very long time. So
I'm for anything that brings Jordan joy. So that part's great. But from a practical standpoint, from a cost-effective standpoint, Saudi Arabian princes, right?
Back to that. Okay, well, this is actually a really good segue into the next main story here, where I wanted to give everyone an update on getting my cameras repaired, because I would say probably 2 months ago, if not more, I mentioned that after my dad passed away, he left me a few things. And one of the things that he left me were his 2 Nikon F film cameras, the ones that he shot all of his black and white photography on through the 70s and 80s. And they were not in fantastic shape. The lenses were very dirty. The camera bodies were kind of beat up, and I wasn't sure, like one of them was not like functioning quite right. Like the film advancer was getting jammed. So I was looking for a place to get them repaired. And I, of course, was looking locally here in Portland. But when KEH heard that I was looking for someone, this was before, and you may have noticed there was a tonal change in some of the ads that Chris has been reading, where it's like, you can actually get your stuff repaired at KEH. I did not know that.
Idea.
They did not know that. And KEH was like, oh, yeah, we did definitely do that. I'm like, you should probably tell people. So here's what I'll say. I did get it repaired through KEH. And right now, if you're on YouTube, you're watching some video feed of them actually repairing my camera. So you can see their crew going through and taking the camera apart, taking the lenses I sent them apart, cleaning them, and putting them all back together. What I'll say is, I think that for someone like me, because I live in Portland, Oregon, I've got at least 2, if not 3 places here that would have done similarly, like a local place. However, there are folks like Jeremy, who lives out in Buffalo, New York. His options are more limited. If he was up in Maine, where his parents live, is even more limited than that. Then there are folks who are living in like middle America, in more rural areas, that they don't have like local expertise on this sort of thing. So like, while I do recommend you go try and support your local businesses, and when I went and purchased film, I got a new lens and some film. I went to Blue Moon Camera and Machine here in Portland, and I purchased that stuff, and I'm going to keep going to them for that sort of thing. But if you're really like out in the sticks and you have older equipment, and you don't have local access to something, or you're concerned that the local access you do have is either too expensive, or you don't know if they're doing it actually in-house there, I will say that I'm very pleased with what KEH did for my camera. Feels like new. There's still chunks of it that they couldn't fix. Like my dad clearly banged his F into something. There's a big old dent in it.
But that's cool. You wouldn't want to fix that anyway.
I don't want that dent fixed. That's my dent. What I thought was neat is, I mentioned, if you go back and watch some of the podcast episodes from before, there was like, he had done one of those punch labels from like the way back when, and he stuck his name on there, said Schneider on it. And then there was also some weird sticky on the bottom. Well, they got rid of the weird sticky on the bottom, which someone in the comments said was probably a way for it to keep its purchase on these old classic tripods, because they would wiggle around a little bit unless you gave it something there. They got rid of that and cleaned it up. Looks great on the bottom now. And then when they took off the label, I told them that they could remove the Schneider labeling. They actually sent it back. So they didn't just throw it away. Oh, nice. I still have the original punch label for myself if I want it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So if you send in gear to KEH, will they always film themselves taking everything apart? Or do you have to be like a YouTube celebrity like Jaron, and then you get the VIP treatment on that?
I don't believe that they will do that normally. No.
Okay, great.
And I can't tell you how much it will cost to repair whatever you're sending in, because they need to evaluate it there. You can say no if they tell you, if you think it's too expensive or whatever, and you'll only pay the shipping to get it back to them, which is not that much. But it was not a crazy expense to get this done, and it happened. It took them I think a couple weeks, but I didn't rush it, and I didn't ask them to give me any priority over anyone else, to take as much time as they needed. Right. And it got me in the mood for shooting and film again anyway. That's not fast. So I have been shooting. I'm going to do another follow-up. So in this podcast, in the description below, I'll link to it, because I'm going to write a story about this and show some of the pictures and like the before and after of what my cameras looked like. But I've been shooting on film. I took my camera to New York, and I did some shooting there. And I'll be shooting some more when we go down to California for the Adobe thing next week. I'm sure I'll hang out with you guys and take some more pictures. But I'm kind of tying back to what you said, Jordan, about having fun with film.
Yeah. I'm stealing your film camera when we're in California, and I'm going to push a roll through it as well.
Yeah,
Make me happy.
You should, because it's fun. It is fun to shoot on film, and it makes. I was really enjoying myself, and the sounds that they make, like the firing of the shutter, the advancing of the film.
Do it.
Oh yeah.
Well, I got to work my camera here. Very, very important. Otherwise it's gonna have to go in for repair.
What do you got there?
My FE, my first camera. But yeah, very important that you keep working these things. Oh,
yeah, it's nice.
So nice.
What lens you got on there?
Aperture blades. I got so many lenses. This is a 28 f2.8. Great lens.
That's the same one I have.
Yes, under my recommendation, I believe. But this is the old one. This is the pre-AI. No, this is an AI.
Yeah.
No, it's an AIS. Never mind. It's the AIS. We have the same lens, Jaron. This is the lens.
Yeah, it's a good lens. I bought a Keks light meter, Keks. By the way, it's like very small, like the size of my eye. Well, my F does not have a hot shoe or cold shoe mount. So I couldn't put it on top. I carry it around in my pocket. So when I said on Threads that I'm enjoying pulling out this little thing, and someone was like, "Why are you making it so hard? Just wear it around your neck or stick it on your camera." And I'm like, "Well, the whole reason I went with the Keks is because I don't want another thing dangling around my neck.
Yeah.
I'm already a strap guy, unlike Chris. Chris is a hand strap man. I'm a neck strap guy.
Look at that. Hey, wrist strap. There you go. That's
I like to be able to sling it over and then around behind myself when I'm walking, and I want my hands free. So I don't mind sticking this little sugar cube sized light meter in my pocket, and it works great. I hope. I don't know. I haven't developed any film yet.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take the rolls that I have in all together, and we'll see if I got anything in focus or properly exposed. But I'm having a great time. Love it.
Nice. That's good.
And I just thought I'd give everyone an update.
I'm not just pulling this camera out to like show it off. Like it is actually very important. If you guys have these old lenses and cameras, you gotta work them. You gotta work them. So that not only includes firing the shutter, advancing the film lever, that kind of stuff. They got a lot of oils and stuff. You don't want them just coagulating and sitting and getting hard. But lenses too, right? Work those focus rings occasionally. Especially like Nikon, you have a little aperture actuation switch on the back, and so flick those aperture blades. Make sure that they're moving and stuff. This old gear needs to be exercised every once in a while. If you just kind of leave it and let it to sit,
it's like a car.
Not good for the gear. Yeah,
classic
sure,
car.
Absolutely. So you gotta kind of work the functions and just make sure it's still going. Yeah.
All right. I had something I was going to add. Now I can't. Oh, so the only thing that isn't repairable about my dad's cameras, and I talked to Chris about this, and I confirmed it with Chris.
The light meter?
Yeah, my dad's the Photomic light meter on the FTN is using, what's that cell? Like it's an old school
CDS silicone cells. Yeah, just I don't exactly. I think it's CDS, but yeah,
they just die.
They die. They wear out because they're light activated. They don't need battery power, but they wear out. They burn out.
So I don't get to use that, which is why I had to buy a light
Yeah.
meter. But in all the pictures of my dad with his camera, you can see the Photomic light meter on top. Like he used the hell out of that thing. So,
but the shutters and just like they're great.
Yeah.
As long as you don't stick a finger in them, they're great. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's amazing that like a 45-year-old camera with a quartz timed like shutter, it works great to this day, right? Like it's incredible.
They are simple yet incredible devices. They're fun.
Yeah.
All right, last thing on the board this week. Jordan is not letting up. He will not stop saying this, and I need pros and cons from each of you because I don't know how you feel, Chris, and then I want to hear from everyone else.
Yes.
Jordan wants to start shooting in HDR, and he wants to do the whole YouTube channel in HDR. And I was pulling the reins on that, and now he's like, well, what about if we just do all the smartphone reviews on HDR? So
yeah,
Jordan,
I'm going to plead my case here. Now, first of all, I'm not going to be shooting these in HDR because I'm already shooting them in log, which gives me tons of dynamic range. I'm talking publishing it in HDR for all of you on YouTube to watch it. And I mean, let me say the benefits first, because I think all of the companies have done a terrible job of explaining this. It's always like darker, richer blacks and brighter highlights. It's that it can go brighter. And we did do a test with the iPhone 15 Pro, where that was the first video that I published in HDR. And frankly, didn't know how to use it at that point. So I made I'm like, oh, I got all this headroom in the brights here. Let's just use that a lot. So if you watched it on an HDR display that was like Dolby capable, you got a nice, bright, very bright image. If you watched it on anything else, it just looked like a blown out Chris strolling around. When YouTube did its like HDR to 709 conversion, it did a terrible job. And we got a bunch of complaints about that. In the meantime, I've talked about this before. I am physical media Jordan now. I've gotten a 4K HDR Blu-ray player. I'm watching a lot of 4K HDR content, and I'm seeing how like good filmmakers are using it. And basically, what I found is it gives us the option for like a really nice peak brightness if it's going to enhance the image. And there's a lot of movies that are doing a great job of that. We talked recently about Civil War, where a character's dying and the flames suddenly get incredibly bright, and it's very visually useful. But on top of that, HDR photography looks fantastic. I love the look of having like these very bright highlights. And, there's a great example in our iPhone review where we had some light streaming through the trees in a picture that Chris took. And being able to make that light very, very bright, I think is very compelling. And I think we focus so much on resolution, like, 8K, 8K, 8K. I think actually looking at a proper HDR image is way more compelling than more resolution. I think it looks better. And I think we need to be pushing these companies like, yes, there are still incompatibility issues. There's a lot of confusion about it. But I think it's kind of on us to maybe take the lead on this a little bit. We're a camera review channel. We review tech. And just say, look, it can be better. We're going to publish on it and let everyone else catch up. That's where my mind is with it. So that's why I was talking about bringing the whole show over there and just weathering a year's worth of like, this video grade looks terrible. And I'm like, please go watch it on an HDR display or, and the big thing too is for a while it was like, oh, HDR displays. So that's your home TV. But now that we're seeing, the Apple screens are actually doing really nice HDR support. All of the phones, if you get a current premium smartphone, it's going to display at the very least an HDR10 signal, which I could grade for. There's a lot more devices out there. But then Jaron, the other day, we were talking, told me what people are actually using to play back our videos.
I was going to get to that.
Yeah.
So that is my response to this.
This is his counterpoint. So why don't you fill him in, Jaron?
So Chris hasn't seen these numbers. So I asked Jordan. Jordan's already been spoiled, so I can't ask him. But Chris, if I had to ask you, what is the number one device that people watch the show on? What would you say?
I would say home TV.
Incorrect.
Computer monitor.
Also incorrect.
Phone.
Which phone?
Probably Apple iPhones.
Correct. iOS is 25.5% of the viewership, which is great. So if that was where we were going with this and that was the biggest number, then yeah, Jordan,
perfect.
I think you would be
I've
in
made
good
a
shape.
compelling case. Podcast over. Oh, damn it.
The second most, what do you think, Chris?
I don't know. Didn't I already pick it?
Technically, but you weren't specific enough. It's Windows PCs. Okay. And what I'll say is, as someone who is using displays that are made for PC, and they are very expensive and very nice, and technically HDR, and this is where the hitch comes.
Depending, yeah.
None of these display our iPhone video very well. They all look like hot trash on all three of these. I have 2 Sony displays and 1 Acer display. And what the thing is, they say HDR 400, and people will see the HDR on there. HDR 400 is not HDR. Yes. I don't care what anyone claims. I don't think it becomes HDR until a minimum of 600. And the visuals of a good HDR display don't start until 800. And those numbers refer to brightness. And unfortunately, a vast majority of displays that you get for your computer are not anywhere near HDR 6 or 800. Most you'll see they knit out at like at best 400. Some are in the 300 still, especially for photographers who are using like BenQ color accurate displays. Yeah, those are like 380. They're horrible.
Yeah. Well, you could all just buy a Shinobi camera monitor and watch our show on that.
So either you have to buy an OLED or a really expensive micro LED. And we're talking like thousands of dollars for ones that take DisplayPort, which is what PC people are using. They want DP. I use a mix of DP and HDMI. And that brings to the next one. So that's 24.1% of the viewers are on a PC. And then the next one is Android, where it's another 24.1%. I'm not allowed to see what exact device they're using from what I can tell. But like knowing how Android users are, they're probably not upgrading every year. So like I'm not thinking that a lot of these have HDR displays. So that's 50% of the viewership does not necessarily have HDMI display. On top of that, the next one is Mac. And a lot of Macs now don't come with a Mac display. Yeah. The Mac Studio and the Mac Mini, you have to buy your own. And like many people are going to be like me and are going to buy one of these displays that don't actually do HDR.
Right.
Chris, Smart TV is 2.5% of viewership, by the way. Not even
That's
anywhere close.
madness to me. I remember it being so much higher when we were back at the camera store.
Super low.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I still use a PC computer, obviously, and I love it. And I'm not going to use a Mac computer anytime soon.
I use a PC too.
Is PC computer redundant?
Yes, it is. Personal computer.
Wonderful. But I do also use the iPad, which does have an HDR display. I have an iPhone.
And that also counts as an iOS device.
Yes, it does.
Yes. It does, and I do have an Apple iPhone, which I use primarily, and that does have HDR displays. And then I will also consume content on a TV. Like, what's interesting in my case is I consume a lot of content on multiple displays, and frankly, more based on what's most convenient at the time.
Correct.
Right? Like,
me too.
If I'm working here, then I can watch Netflix on here. But otherwise, I use it on the TV, or I'll watch YouTube on my phone, or on this screen, or on the TV. And so I'm editing photos on multiple displays, sometimes the PC, sometimes the iPad, right? Doing video editing, same thing. And so I feel like whatever format we're going to do, it has to render well across the most kinds of displays. And I know, like Jordan's saying, a big part of that was grading mistakes in the first attempt.
Well, we're also at the mercy of YouTube's like conversion algorithm.
Their HDR down conversion is not great, especially if I push something to the direction that I did with that iPhone video.
And that's the difference between watching something on like Netflix, where they actually have a decent conversion.
They have a very good,
so like
HDR
that's why that's fine.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chris, continue.
No. So these are issues that we have to consider, right? Like we did get a lot of pushback on that. I feel like if Jordan's going to do that, it means you can't grade to the sort of maximum potential
of HDR.
Well, you can't put important information in there. So
yes, right.
That's what I'm seeing on a lot of movies is like skin tone and things like that. They stay in the lower channels. But then if you do have like, bright sun, window reflection, things like that, a lot of Disney movies, all the magic is in the HDR is what I'm noticing when Ivy's watching princess movies. Like Little Mermaid has a banging HDR transfer right now. And it's just like sparkly water and magic that is HDR and it looks great. So would you enjoy the process of editing your photos for HDR? Because what we did with the iPhone is I did the grade within the video edit.
I would not enjoy that. No, not at all. It's like
you just have more highlight headroom. What's the downside?
Hell no. So here's the thing. Like, first off, Jordan loves HDR. He's big on HDR. I know a lot of people are.
Yeah,
right. A lot of
right here.
You like it too, right?
Great.
And I get it. And I guess the analog would be like hi-fi sound systems back in the day, right? You can squeeze out this information. To me, I'm not really bothered by it. And Jordan and I had this conversation quite a few times where it's like in movies, I'm not bothered so much by the technical, like all the technicalities of the filmmaking. I like the story. I like the characters. I like to be engaged. I'll watch a show on multiple displays and I don't care. I'm not, and I feel like for me, I don't want to be pulled out of like, oh, this is an HDR, so now it's garbage, right? I want to just be like, evaluate it for the creative work that it is. At the same time, like my photos, I don't want to edit them for an HDR color space if that's not the intention that I have creatively. So,
Jordan, I could be convinced. I would need to see a video that you've graded for HDR recently. Like now with all this
so
knowledge,
we are coming into smartphone season, and that's why we wanted to do this on this episode. I want to hear from the viewers because I think smartphones make a lot of sense because so much of what they're doing is, having their HDR images display properly on their phone, which is a very bright display.
I would be willing to bend to that because there are like 3 major ones every year. There's Google, there's Apple, and there's Samsung.
It's going to change, like, especially for photography, as opposed to cinematic filmmaking, it's going to change the look of the image on an HDR display. And it's not going to render properly then if people are looking at it on a regular display.
Correct.
And this is kind of funny. We're talking about the Z6 III and dynamic range and all this kind of stuff. And I am kind of the mindset that it's great to have dynamic range, but it's not really the be all end all. There's very few situations where I'm absolutely pushing the dynamic range to the maximum, or where I'm not getting rid of detail creatively, like darkening shadows and stuff like that, because I don't care. Creatively, I don't want to capture every single pixel and level of detail possible. Creatively, I want it to be a little bit stylized. I don't mind darkening things or not worrying about highlight information blowing out because it's, so I don't want my creative artistic goal to then be editing these photos for the benefit of HDR display users who want to see maximum saturation, maximum brightness in the highlights. I don't necessarily want to have that mindset. I want to still creatively edit the photos the way that I want them to look like, and that probably isn't going to go that HDR kind of look.
All right. So very quickly, 2 ways we can do this. If we produce an HDR video, do you want me to keep your photos in the SDR color space? So it's just not taking advantage of those brightest areas. Or do you want the brightest parts of the image brought up?
I don't know. I mean, I'm still going to edit these photos and then send you the files to upload. So, I don't know that they'll necessarily fill an HDR color space anyways.
No, I'd stretch it up.
I don't know. Okay. I mean, look, I'm all for you trying it as an experiment, and let's see.
I want to hear from the viewers.
Say. Yeah. Let's see what the viewers say.
Okay, let's do it. And what I'm going to do also is I'll put a poll on the community tab.
Great.
To see what people think as well. And I think I'm going to frame it more like, are you using an HDR display? Parentheses, right. HDR 400 does not count.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And smartphones are different. Like we're talking about smartphone reviews. Smartphones are different. Like obviously the JPEGs I'm shooting are in HDR color space. I'm not doing a ton of editing, although when we do our reviews for smartphone for photography, I do edit those RAW files. So let's see.
Yeah, we'll see what the people have to say, Jordan. You're leaving the decision in their hands.
Absolutely.
All right. What will you be up to? Since we're recording this, the same week you just did, what have you been up to? But why are we doing this early? What's going on in your lives?
Go ahead, we talked about this. I think we talked about this last week too.
Just remind them.
Yeah, we're Jordan and I are off going to BC for a little bit of vacation time because it's like our families are intertwined, so we do a lot of family vacations together. And so we're going to be meeting up in Salmon Arm in BC, beautiful Lake Shuswap. I'm going to try to catch the fish that I lost last time, which haunts me to this day. And not another fish that's the same. Like I want that same damn fish. I want that one.
You put a skull on the one cheek so you can recognize it, right?
Yeah. No, it's terrible. But, so we're going to do that. We're going to hang out for a couple days, and then my wife and I were off to another spot to do the rest of our vacation, and Jordan's going to camp with the rest of his family. But yes, we're still going to be doing some work. That's just the way it is. And then we'll be back.
I can say there's a camera I'm very excited to test on this trip, and I got a notification that something was dropped off at my front door while we were recording this podcast. So
really
exciting stuff. Yeah,
that was quick.
We might actually have a very cool camera. I guess we could say it. It's not embargoed. Hopefully I'll have an R5 too that I'll be able to shoot in BC. Get some video samples.
Production R5 II.
Exciting times.
Update on my thumb.
Yes.
Much smaller bandage today. Yeah, there it is. I'm healing well.
How's your mobility?
Very nice.
I played video games last night. I took...
thank God.
Was it because I would just love like a hidden camera where you're just like, ow, ow, playing Destiny.
So I had to take a painkiller because it wasn't that it was painful. It was that the slight change in how it's supposed to feel was reducing my input. So I needed to like get rid of that feel so that I didn't, it's like every time I was like not quite as fast as I wanted to be. By the end of the night, I felt normal, but this morning I woke up and it was a little bit sore. So I think I may have pushed it a little too hard. So I'm going to, rest it again today.
So are painkillers like a performance enhancing drug for video gamers? I don't know ethically where I stand on that.
It's Jaron. An Advil. I didn't take like a Vicodin. I think that would have hurt my performance. More on what we will be up to. As a reminder, everyone, we are going to be going down to California. We're going to go to Adobe's headquarters and ask them all of your burning questions.
Yes.
The goal there is they actually want to engage again with photographers. They recognize they have not been doing a very good job over the last couple of years. This is the start of that. And as such, we are going to ask them real difficult questions. They know it. They know they're coming and they're ready to answer them. We don't know who we're talking to yet. But we will at some point. And then also, this is not embargoed. Everyone knows it exists. There is a Made by Google launch event that we are also going to in Mountain View. We don't know what we'll be seeing. We have thoughts. We believe we know what it is. But if it's anything that will affect all y'all's purchases in the next year, we'll have information on that too.
And I'm publishing it in HDR, baby.
Even more importantly than HDR or Google or anything else, I did actually catch yesterday, which again will be out of context for this video, but I caught recently a personal best brown trout on the Bow River, 24 inches, beautiful
Send
fish.
Jaron the photo so we can put it on
Did you do a video of that on Instagram?
No, but there's a photo of it. There's a photo of it if you want to see it.
I do want to see it.
It's a nice fish. It's a nice fish.
Okay. I'll go look at it.
Personal best.
Good job. All right. With that out of the way, let's do some tech support, of which, again, a mammoth list. We're going to start with a speak pipe from Caleb Everett. Let's listen in.
Hello, Jaron, Jordan, and Chris. I really enjoy your podcast, and I finally decided to make a speak pipe. A little while ago, you guys said that Apple is the only company where you could use both their software and hardware from start to end for processing a video or picture. And I'd like to make a case for another company as well. Sony owns cameras. They own an editing software, Imaging Edge, and they own a phone, the Xperia. And they used to own their own line of computers called Veo, but they later spun it off as its own company, but they still have stake in the company and own the logo and name rights. So even if their software is horrible, I do think that you could use only Sony products from start to end as well. What do you guys think?
Yeah, in theory, Caleb, you're absolutely right. Yes,
this is an entirely theoretical thing. This week, my wife was testing the ZV-E10 too, and they shot all their photos RAW only, not RAW plus JPEG. So they needed to be converted. No Adobe support yet. What are we going to do? So I opened Imaging Edge, and first of all, I think it was like 100 images that took like 50 minutes. To convert it over, which would have taken 3 minutes on a DNG converter probably. But then crashed on the last file, and some of them just didn't convert. They're just like missing file names in there. And that's just doing a raw. I didn't even try adjusting these things. So once again, Imaging Edge, we did an entire car ride where I bitched about it, but still... Though, I mean, is it the worst? It might be the worst. Yeah.
No, the Canon one's not good either.
Yeah. They're all bad. Canon's is terrible too. Yeah. I mean, basically every time that I have to go in and do like a photo stitch for a Sony, review or something, yeah, it's not a nice process. My face, I get sad and grumpy, and then I don't look forward to it. And then doing it, it's horrible and slow and it crashes. Yeah, it's garbage. The Xperia phones, I had one. I liked it. Obviously, they don't do them very much anymore. Like, they're not available in Canada anymore. The States, I don't know.
They didn't launch the latest one in North America at all.
It was Japan only.
Yeah, so that's sad. I mean, I liked it. I had no problem with it, but I haven't tested one in a long time because they're just not relevant in North America anymore. So, but yes, Caleb, theoretically, you're right.
You win.
I'm sure the computers are fine.
Yeah, files are fine. They're PCs.
Should we make a series of shirts that just say, you were right, we were wrong, and we'll just send them to people who give us comments correcting us, and they are correct? I think that'd be great.
And just for context, I think more importantly, what we were saying about Apple, not just that you can use them from start to finish, but that, Apple is kind of this company that has become like a bona fide camera company, I think was really the spin that we were trying to put on that.
Spin. Next one is an email from Dexter, and it's a multi-question question. Hi, Jaron, Chris, and Jordan. Haha, Jordan's at the end this time. It's Dexter again. Thank you for addressing my questions on the podcast from the other day. I can't remember when we did that, but you're welcome. He's got more. I once tried a Sigma FP.
I'm sorry.
Really like the
I'm sorry for
I really like the orange and teal color mode, but I tried a bunch of photo editing software, including Affinity, DxO, Photolab, Capture One, and Luminar Neo. Never used Adobe Lightroom and Photoshop because I don't want a subscription. Don't blame you. None of them can read the raw files with the embedded color tone like Fujifilm's film simulation does. I know using Sigma's own Photo Pro software, I didn't know they had that, we'll be able to read those.
Caleb's, go back like a minute and listen to our talk with Caleb there about Imaging Edge.
Is it like the same as Sigma's bad too?
Yeah, they're all bad. I mean, we kind of did this already. Like,
I don't remember
us talk about
I didn't know Sigma had one.
We haven't used it since the Foveon cameras because you had to use that to convert them back in the day. But yeah, with the modern Bayer Sigma cameras, I don't know why you'd ever open it. Continue, sorry.
Yeah, well, he just says it keeps force quitting on his M2 Mac, which is frustrating. It doesn't sound 100%. Like that surprises you a little, even in the least. Is this a Sigma problem or other software developers reluctant to support the metadata?
So one of the cool things with the Sigma cameras is they shoot DNGs. So I do think like Adobe software is probably going to give you the best shot at actually seeing the embedded color space on it. If not, first party manufacturer, have fun.
Yeah. Okay. Or you'll have to make your own presets in those other softwares that will give you that same kind of look, which obviously is going to be a lot of work on your part.
The good thing is that's one of the most common color profiles that you can get from all sorts of packages is that gold teal look. It's a very popular aesthetic. So you'll be able to find some options out there. But maybe try running it through Adobe. Even just use DNG Converter. See if it passes that through.
I doubt it will.
When is the best time to use a mechanical electric front curtain or electronic shutter? According to Photons to Photos, why do some cameras have worse dynamic range when using an electronic shutter?
Yeah, so I guess the dynamic range thing first. We talked about this a little bit too with our Z6 III last week. Usually it's a drop in bit depth in order to support the electronic shutter, the readout speeds, the faster burst rates. There's usually a subsequent drop. And I think we have another question we're going to talk about here later on if we get to it, which is similar. As far as what I like to shoot for those three, mechanical, EFC, or electronic, I do usually prefer mechanical shutter. First off, you're going to get the best image quality out of your camera, which may or may not be different when you use electronic shutter mode, depending on the camera. But EFC is a nice option when you want to have the benefits of mechanical shutter, but you get a little bit less mirror slap or shutter shake, depending on the camera you're using. And that can absolutely influence. Like when I'm doing lens chart tests and stuff like that for sharpness, at slower shutter speeds, even on a tripod, the mechanical shutter can cause a little bit of blur. And so that's where EFC can be really nice. But EFC does have an issue with really wide aperture shooting, like bright lenses, f1s, f1.2s, 1.4s, where you can get kind of a funny truncated bokeh look. Again, this will only apply on shots where you are shooting wide aperture and you're shooting shallow depth of field and you care what the bokeh looks like.
And fast shutter speeds.
And fast shutter speeds. So it's pretty limited use case. So EFC is perfectly fine to use in most situations, and it will give you a little bit more stability. Electronic shutter is ideal because it can be silent. You will get no slap or shake whatsoever. But then you have issues with, am I going to get banding in certain lighting? Rolling shutter, if you've got things moving across the frame, are they going to look diagonal? And of course, you also have issues with things like perhaps a drop in bit depth or a drop in dynamic range in your photo.
Yep.
Last of his three questions is, why are Chinese lens manufacturers able to pump out a bunch of lenses like every other week? And why can they suddenly launch a bunch of autofocus lenses starting like last year? I thought lens design is complicated and takes years to build.
They're an industrious people.
No, I do think like a lot of them are piggybacking on, like, we suddenly saw one autofocus from Rokinon, and then suddenly they all started popping up as from different makes as well. I do think that a lot of them are sharing technology, using the same components, things like that. And a lot of their optical formulas, you know, a bunch of them aren't original.
Yeah, they don't. I will say this much as someone who used to work in manufacturing and in the photographic industry, they are extremely fast at just taking your design and copying it. They're really good at it.
Are you saying corporate espionage runs rampant in the Chinese industrial workplace?
Yes.
Okay.
And so they also, if you'll watch Chris's first review on some Chinese lenses, you'll notice he points out a lot of things that are like, yeah, this is a flaw that it's not perfect. They're cheaper, so you're not going to get a lot of what these other companies, these Japanese companies, are trying to do, which is get a lot of things right, do things the correct way, work directly with the manufacturer, and have a robust relationship with dealers around the world, and work directly with photographers and others. Like these Chinese companies are just like make it and sell it everywhere they can, and
but
as quickly as
it's
possible.
also like optical lens design is very complicated science, but it's been around for a long time. And so I think part of it too is like a lot of these Chinese manufacturers, they're remaking old optical formulas for fun, right? Specifically for Leica cameras, and Seven Artisans does, like a lot of companies do these, and they're rehashing classical formulas which are already known designs. So it's not like you have to go back and reinvent the wheel or make your own elements, design like exactly where they're going to be. You can follow the rules for how this optical formula is made. It's already written down like a recipe. And on top of that, they're marketing these lenses as character lenses. So they're not trying to specifically correct optical flaws and difficult flaws. In fact, a lot of cases, they're retaining the flaws that were inherent in those classic designs, which we have now largely eliminated with modern lens design. So, and again, some of these companies do attempt to do more modern lens design.
Venus,
that was the point I wanted to make.
Yeah. Venus,
Laowa.
Yeah, Venus Laowa. So Laowa is a brand inside of Venus, and Venus Optics, they typically don't release a lens every other week. You'll get a couple a year because they're actually making some neat things that are unique.
That's never been attempted before.
But otherwise, you're making copies, right? And copies are easy to make, and you can pump them out. And, most of these lenses aren't autofocus. They're mechanical completely. And, so it's probably not that hard to do. Yeah. Not that hard to do.
All right. Next one. This one is probably mainly for you, Jordan. It's from John on SpeakPipe. Let's listen in.
Hey guys, this is John from Thunder Bay, Ontario. Like Jordan, I used to sell cameras at Black's Photography, and it's so nostalgic to feel like I'm talking shop with coworkers again when I listen to your show. Like Jordan, I'm also a Lumix user, and like Jordan, I make YouTube videos for a living, filming wilderness camping trips with the S5 and S5 II. Yes, Chris, there is fishing, but sorry, Jaron, there is no gunpla, and there never will be. My question is about noise floors and preamps. Can you describe these things in layman's terms, and what causes them to be worse on some cameras than others? I use on-camera shotgun mics, and when I bought the S5 II, I discovered that there was a subtle hiss in my audio. It sounds kind of like digital crickets. It's not the fan, focus motor, or stabe, and interestingly, the digital crickets stop when using the crop modes. I know this is very specific, so I'm just looking for noise floors and preamps 101 or anything else you think might be relevant. Finally, like Jordan, I used to drive a Ford Windstar. Mine was 98 in champagne gold. Big fan. Thanks so much.
It's amazing. I've got my doppelganger out in Thunder Bay, so that's very impressive. Black's is a glorious place to start your career, it turns out.
Look where it's led you.
Yeah, totally. It's amazing. So we actually did a video a while back with our friend Alex Mitchell, aforementioned in this episode, looking at different camera preamps. Now, the thing where it's changing the hiss when you switch to DX mode, I have never encountered that ever. That's very bizarre to me. Mm-hmm. But we have certainly seen, different levels of noise from different cameras. And back in the day, it wasn't a real priority. Like I think of the early Canon DSLRs, where there was just a constant, I don't know if they just shoved electronics right up against the microphone jack on that, but there was a constant buzz, even using professional grade microphones. For a long time, Nikon was using some. And essentially, I really liken it to a sensor. If you've got a really cheap preamp for your audio, it's going to introduce a lot of that noise. And unlike image noise with kind of that moving thing, it's that kind of sound, and you might see some frequencies getting cut off. So it just wasn't a huge priority. It wasn't something people were testing a lot on cameras. So camera manufacturers would often just throw the cheapest possible preamps in there. And it meant we had to run a really hot signal. I'm sure Jaron remembers the good old Rode Video Mic Pro. Do you remember that? Yeah, where it had an option to boost the gain by 20 decibels, so it would be usable on a Canon camera. So you could run your audio at the absolute lowest setting, and you might be able to escape some of that hiss in it. Where now we're starting to see like the Panasonic, the GH5 was notoriously like an incredibly strong preamp on it. And there were some microphones where you couldn't get the signal low enough for it. So since then, Panasonic is now, they're doing basically like a dual gain audio input where you have a low and a standard mode for it. So if you're running really sensitive mics, you can drop that down. But yeah, it's become a big priority for camera manufacturers in the last little while. Like most of them, I know, like Olympus previously and Nikon were kind of the last stragglers using pretty weak preamps, so you had to send a strong signal. Now I'm basically every camera that comes through, I'm not encountering that hiss on it. But yeah, it's just the quality of components that they're using, and they're prioritizing in the camera design that this audio needs to be. It's an important aspect of it. When we talk about, the noise floor on that, that's basically the point where you're not able to hear noise. Now, if you boost audio way up, just like boosting an image, you're going to increase that noise in it. So just be aware that it's better to run a hot signal without clipping into your microphones than to record really low and bring everything up. That's going to introduce more noise into it.
I'll be honest, I didn't really know the nitty gritty of all this, but that certainly explains why on my GH5 I was with my Sennheisers, the gain was I was putting that like negative 20, 25, and it sounded really good. So that makes sense. And I also on the camera also had turned it way down too. So
Panasonic Panasonic pioneered good preamps in their cameras, and that was a big part of why we used them a lot. And I remember there was like lots of good lav mics and stuff we wanted to use that were very high quality, but didn't have like a built-in amplifier or whatever. And so it was nice to have cameras like Panasonic that had good, strong preamps to work with those, where you wouldn't add a lot of damage. So yeah,
do you remember? They're still leading the way because they're 32-bit float.
Yeah, they're the first camera company to do that on the GH7. Do you remember the GH4 grip, Chris? Which got you some XLRs and SDIs, and it was the size of, let's say, 4 to 5 GH4s. It was just enormous, and no power supply built in. You'd have to power it separately.
We use
good
that
times.
all the time.
Yeah.
Good times. Yep.
All right, next one is a question from Ryan. This is an email. Both Canon and Nikon will now have high-resolution stacked sensor bodies with great speed for around $4,000. If you're a wildlife shooter with Sony, it's the $6,500 A1, or settle for less speed, or settle for the 24-megapixel A9 II. What should Sony do to compete better against these prosumer-grade fast cameras? Drop the A1 price or develop something new?
It's going to be a Sony A7 IV, I think, is what they're going to have to do. Because that would then compete with like, Z6 III kind of cameras, R6 II, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think a stacked chip A7 V, not too crazy in the megapixel count. Their focusing's already excellent. Just get those burst rates up, and I think that would appeal to a lot of wildlife shooters.
Yeah, do you think, like, if we're looking at that $4,000 price, do you think that 33 megapixel is still sufficient and just make a stacked version of it? Or do you think they should lean on, the older 42 megapixel from the A7R4 or something like that?
No, I mean, I think for wildlife shooters, I think especially what Ryan's maybe alluding to is getting a camera that's going to have good electronic shutter readout speeds. But yeah,
here's my
Z8.
Here's my just gamble. I'm throwing this out there. I think we're going to see a A7 V, and that might be a partially stacked sensor. That might be the same thing that we've seen with Nikon at that $2,500 mark. But I think they're going to bring the A1 sensor down market. Same thing that Nikon did with the Z8. And I could absolutely see them doing like an, A7 V. I don't know. They'll have to come up with a new abbreviation for it, for the stacked version of that at that kind of $4,000. Because I do think Sony needs something at that price range.
Yeah. They're not going to drop the price on the A1. No. Not going to happen.
Not unless
it'll just be an A1 too. Yeah, exactly.
And then the original A1 will go down in price. That's the only way it'll happen. Because that's their flagship, right? Yeah. Okay. We might have time for one or two more. This is a speak pipe from Jurgen. let's listen in.
Hi, this is Jürgen. I have a question regarding UV filters on lenses. I'm often being told that I should have a UV filter on my lens, primarily to protect it from scratches or other damage. And on most of my lenses, especially the ones I use most often, I tend to actually put a UV filter on them, and I never take it off. But I've recently been wondering, whether that's really necessary. I don't remember the last time that I actually scratched my UV filter, and so as a result, I'm not sure that it really has done much to protect the lens from potential damage. I'm curious what you do. I'm pretty sure you don't use UV filters on lenses that you review, but what do you do for your own photography or videography? Do you use UV filters in some cases, or not at all? Thanks for your inputs, and thanks very much for your podcast.
Yeah, Jürgen, I don't use UV filters on my lenses for photography, and there's a couple reasons. Obviously, when we're reviewing lenses, we just don't want to have the image degradation that a UV filter would impart, just because we're testing the lens.
It's one more piece of glass, yeah.
Yeah, it is an extra piece of glass, and it will change flare characteristics and things like that too. But I also don't use them for my own lenses because I'm lazy and I don't care, and then whatever. But I will say the image quality degradation is basically negligible, okay, for most situations other than testing. So I would say wholeheartedly, if you want to use them, use them. Nobody's going to say like, that would have been a great photo if you hadn't have used a UV filter on the front of it. You know what I mean? Like,
if only.
Yeah, if only, right? Like, man, why would you? No, of course not. But at the same time, how often can you damage lenses? It does happen. It does happen. I try to be careful with other people's lenses, but things happen. We've had a few incidents over the years, whether it's damage with a hard surface like a rock surface, or fine particulate matter can be hard on the lens, and so yeah, I would say
a blacksmith pounding molten pieces of metal right beside your lens that happens to fly into the lens element. Is just a theoretical example.
Yeah. Scratches happen. And, it depends too. Like, I like to shoot quickly. If I'm changing lenses, I shoot quickly. So I'm not anal about putting the lens cap back on and putting it before it goes in my bag. I'm kind of like a quick changer. And depending on your habits and how careful you are with your gear, you could very easily damage your stuff. Does it have an optical impact? Not always, not necessarily, but it's still not nice, and it hurts your resale value and all the rest. And some people get really uptight about any damage on their stuff. So it's really going to be your own, whatever makes you sleep at night, I think is most comfortable. But I will say, not using UV filters, you will eventually damage your lens as it happens. It just happens if you're shooting, especially in a more like professional situation, or like a fast action kind of thing. At the same time, using UV filters isn't going to hurt your image quality in any perceptible way that you'd really need to worry about.
I just want to say quickly, I find a hood is extremely good for most kinds of damage at preventing it. An object bumping into it, it keeps your front element back, and it does have actual benefits to your image quality, cutting down on flare. So I find a hood is excellent protection. The only time I wish I had UV filters is one time a Mr. Michael Bonacore took us to Idaho, and we tore around on scooters, and there was rocks and dirt flying at the front of our lens elements. And in that situation, UV filter would have been pretty great. Sure. As opposed to scratching the living hell out of all of my ND filters.
But also, I guess recording on the road and stuff like that, sure. But, that's what I mean. It happens, yeah. But we weren't being super careful either in some cases, right?
Okay, true. But also that was a really punishing environment. So even if we were,
but that's photography.
I don't really know that we would have mattered, yeah.
UV filters.
Punishing environments happen.
I'm not a UV filter guy. I've never... Geez, I don't have any wood to knock on because my desk is made of steel, but I've never personally damaged any of my lenses in any way. I'm kind of manic about how meticulous I am with them. The only time I ever had damage was to my Sigma 35mm f1.4 art for DSLRs, and it was because my wife was helping me shoot a concert, and she got pushed and the front of the lens hit one of the fences that divides you between the front of the stage and cracked the front element of that.
Just throwing your wife under the bus. Like, Jaron, have never damaged a lens, but one time I brought my wife out.
I saw it and I'm like, Sigma's cool. They're going to be able to repair this. And guess what? They were. So.
Yeah. I don't think I've personally cracked a lens.
It's hard to do.
I've put hairline scratches in the front of some optics for sure. Yeah.
That I believe.
Yeah.
Just like, you've got those manly outdoors hands. You probably
I treat lenses and camera gear like tools. I don't baby them.
They're tools.
I don't baby them. And that's not criticism against people who baby them, but I don't. Like I smash them around, I drop them in my bag, I put them on the ground. Well, I think that they're photographic tools. Yeah.
All right.
Like a hammer.
Last question of the week. This one's for Chris from Peter McGinty. This is a comment on YouTube. I use an OM5. If I use the electronic shutter, do I take a hit to dynamic range compared to the mechanical shutter? Thank you.
Yeah. What's interesting is you don't really. Micro Four Thirds sensors, if you really look at them, they don't tend to have a drop in dynamic range going from electronic shutter to mechanical shutter. We also saw this on like the Nikon Z6 III, which we just talked about. So but most of the time you do, depends on the camera. It really depends on the camera and the sensor. But Micro Four Thirds generally... I don't see a difference. No.
Yeah, on that 20 megapixel sensor, because Micro Four Thirds cameras were all capturing at 12-bit anyways. It's not like there's a drop in bit depth from 14 down, and that is definitely not a concern with that camera. It is not a fast reading out sensor, so you might run into rolling shutter, but you don't have a DR hit.
Yeah, so if you want those fast burst rates, go for it. Yeah.
All right, that's going to do it. This is the only video on the YouTube channel this week because you two, at present, as people are hearing these sounds in their ears, you two are enjoying the lovely outdoors. When everyone sees us again, we will be at Adobe in San Jose asking them all of your questions. So again, please keep them coming. I saw some that were in the podcast last week. I've already added them to the list. If yours are not specifically asked, it's because someone else asked a very similar question and theirs just got put in the list first. But we will make sure to ask as many as possible. We've got them for a full podcast to make them answer everything. So there we go. Thanks very much for joining us, everyone. We'll see you there.
See you soon.